scrubbing offices while others built empires. Her co-workers were often invisible to the executives, but Evelyn wore her invisibility like armor. No one expected her to speak up, to question, to notice. Yet she noticed everything. Richard Serrano was the kind of man people whispered about, a self-made mogul who clawed his way from a poor immigrant background to become one of the richest men in the state. He lived on control of markets, of people, of his image. The newspapers called him indestructible, but Evelyn, with her quiet eyes, saw otherwise. That morning, she remembered how her husband, Harold, had ignored the signs, the fatigue, the shortness of breath, the grayish skin that no one noticed until he collapsed at work. By the time the ambulance came, it was too late. Evelyn had buried him at just 55. She swore she would never again stay silent if she saw the signs in someone else. And now, in Richard Serrano, she saw them. Still, doubt gnawed at her. Who was she, a cleaner, to warn a man like him? He would laugh her out of the building. Yet as the hours passed, Evelyn's unease grew. She saw him again during the afternoon, his face slick with sweat despite the cool air conditioning. His jaw clenched tight as he rubbed his chest briefly, when he thought no one was watching. Everyone else kept typing, smiling, pushing presentations, but Evelyn's heart pounded. That night, she went home to her modest apartment and sat by the window, city lights glowing in the distance. Her daughter, Janelle, called from across town to check in. Evelyn hesitated, debating whether to share what she'd seen. Janelle worked in healthcare administration and had a sharper, more practical mind. "Mom," Janelle said after hearing her describe the symptoms, "you might be right. But you can't just walk up to a billionaire and tell him he looks like he's about to keel over." Evelyn exhaled. "But if I don't say anything and something happens..." Her voice trailed off. The next morning, Evelyn's resolve hardened. She couldn't shake the memory of Harold's last smile, the way he'd brushed off her worries. If she had pushed harder, if someone else had noticed, maybe he'd still be alive. This time, she wouldn't let silence win. The following week unfolded like a storm Evelyn could sense, but no one else seemed to notice. Every morning she arrived before sunrise, her mop bucket squeaking faintly against the marble floor, and every morning she watched Serrano stride through the lobby with the same commanding presence, except Evelyn knew the cracks were deepening. She saw it in the slight stagger of his steps, the shadows deepening under his eyes, the way he massaged his temple when he thought no one was looking. But everyone was looking, at his power, his authority, his expensive suits. No one saw the man inside the image. Evelyn did. The silent warnings. On Tuesday afternoon, Serrano held a meeting in the executive boardroom. Evelyn had been tasked with quietly clearing leftover trays of catered food once the meeting ended. Through the glass walls, she could see him at the head of the long table, gesturing with sharp, decisive movements. At first, he was every inch the titan he was known to be. But then Evelyn noticed his hand falter as he reached for a glass of water. His knuckles whitened, his lips thinned as though he were pushing through pain. His voice, steady as iron to everyone else, trembled on a few words. The executives clapped when he finished, rising to shake his hand. Evelyn caught his reflection in the window, a flash of strain in his eyes, his chest rising too quickly, as if even breathing demanded effort. She lingered outside, clutching her rag. Her pulse hammered. She wanted to burst in and shout, "Don't you see it? He's not well." But her throat closed with fear. Who was she compared to men and women in tailored suits who hung on his every word? Her mop squeaked faintly against the floor as she walked away, her heart heavy, a whisper in the dark. That night, Evelyn stayed behind after her shift. She pretended to be polishing the lobby plants, but she was really watching. Serrano exited the elevator past 10 p.m., long after his staff had left. He was alone, his tie loosened, his steps heavier than she'd ever seen. Then it happened. He stumbled. His hand caught the wall, his briefcase nearly slipped. For a split second, he looked fragile, almost human. "Mr. Serrano?" Evelyn called before she could stop herself. Her voice echoed in the grand, empty lobby. He froze, turning his head toward her. His eyes were sharp, impatient, the look of a man not used to being addressed by someone in a cleaner's uniform. "Yes?" he said, clipped. Evelyn swallowed, her courage trembling. Are you feeling all right, sir?" The pause stretched. Serrano's jaw tightened, and then he forced a thin smile. "I'm fine." He adjusted his cufflinks, as if the gesture could reassemble his power. "You just focus on your work, all right?" He walked past her, his cologne trailing, his steps quickening as if to outrun her concern. Evelyn watched him disappear into the night, her chest sinking. But she knew. He's not fine. Not at all. The ignored plea. The next day, Evelyn made a decision. During her break, she climbed up to the HR office, a floor she had never dared enter. The receptionist blinked at her, startled to see a cleaning lady approach with such determination. "I need to speak to someone about Mr. Serrano's health," Evelyn said firmly. The HR manager, a polished young man in a blue suit, raised an eyebrow as she explained what she had noticed. His expression was polite, but dismissive. "Mrs. Carter, with all due respect," he said smoothly, "Mr. Serrano's health is not something you need to be concerned about. The man works 18-hour days. If he looks tired, it's because he's building an empire. That's just who he is." "But I've seen—" Evelyn began, her voice rising with urgency. The manager cut her off with a thin smile. "We appreciate your concern. Truly. But let's not spread rumors about our CEO, all right?" Evelyn's face burned with humiliation as she left. She had spoken up, and no one believed her. Signs no one could ignore. By Friday, the signs became undeniable, at least to Evelyn. She was scrubbing the marble just outside the conference room when Serrano stormed out mid-meeting. His face was pale, his breath shallow. He gripped the wall briefly before straightening, adjusting his suit as though nothing had happened. His assistant scurried after him, whispering about calls and investors. He waved her off. No one dared question him, no one but Evelyn. That night at home, she sat at her kitchen table, staring at a cup of tea gone cold. Her daughter Janelle visited, dropping her bag on the chair. "You look troubled, Mama," Janelle said gently. Evelyn's eyes brimmed. "I see it happening all over again, just like Harold. He's heading for a collapse, Janelle, and no one will listen to me." Janelle reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Then you can't wait for them to listen. You've got to make him hear you." Evelyn looked out the window at the city lights. The thought terrified her, approaching a man like Serrano directly, but if she didn't, she would carry the guilt forever. The turning point. The next Monday, Evelyn's chance came. Serrano entered the lobby late in the evening, his shoulders stiff, his steps slow. Evelyn was alone on the night shift. Her heart pounded as she gripped her mop like a lifeline. "Mr. Serrano," she called, louder this time. He stopped, irritation flashing across his face. "Yes?" She stepped closer, gathering every ounce of courage she had. "Sir, I don't mean to overstep, but I think you need to see a doctor. Now." His expression hardened, but his hand betrayed him. It trembled against his briefcase handle. "I don't need a cleaning lady diagnosing me," he snapped. Evelyn's voice broke, raw with memory. "That's what my husband said, and I buried him at 55. The words hung heavy in the marble silence. Serrano blinked, his mask faltering, for the first time. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, His knees, Richard Serrano, the man the world believed indestructible, lay sprawled across the marble floor of his own empire, his breath shallow, his skin ashen. For a second, time itself froze. The towering lobby that usually pulsed with power was silent, but for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Evelyn Carter's heart slammed against her ribs. Her mop clattered to the floor as she dropped beside him. "Mr. Serrano, stay with me." Her hands trembled, but her voice carried a steadiness she didn't feel. She had lived this moment before, only last time, with Harold, she had been powerless. She would not let history repeat itself. Richard's lips moved, his voice barely, a whisper. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." Evelyn pressed her palm gently against his chest, feeling the erratic hammering beneath. "You listen to me, sir. You are not fine." A race against silence. The lobby was deserted. No security guard at the desk, no assistant to fetch help. Evelyn was alone with a billionaire fighting for his life. She yanked the walkie-talkie, clipped to her belt, used only to communicate with other janitors, and shouted, "I need an ambulance! CEO down in the lobby, now!" Static hissed. No answer. Fear clawed at her throat, but Evelyn pushed it down. She leaned close to Richard, her voice firm. "You're going to make it. Do you hear me? You're not leaving this world tonight." His eyes fluttered half shut, his breathing ragged. Evelyn thought of her husband, the way his chest had stilled beneath her hands that terrible night. A sob rose in her throat, but she swallowed it. This time, she ripped open the top button of his shirt, loosening his tie. "Breathe, Mr. Serrano. Come on now. In and out." His hand twitched against hers, a weak protest. His pride, the armor he wore, was slipping away, replaced by raw, terrifying humanity. Evelyn pressed her ear close to his lips, listening. His breaths were shallow, uneven. She tilted his head back slightly, praying the years-old CPR course she had once taken at the community center would not fail. "Or now, stay with me," she pleaded, beginning chest compressions. Her arms ached, but she pushed with every ounce of strength she had left, her tears blurring her vision. 1, 2, 3. She counted aloud, her voice echoing through the empty lobby. Richard's body jolted weakly beneath her hands. His eyelids flickered, his face twisted in pain. "Good. That's good. Keep fighting," Evelyn urged, sweat streaking down her brow. "You're too stubborn to give up now." Help arrives at last. Footsteps. The security guard burst in, his face paling at the sight. "Call 911, Evelyn barked. The authority in her voice startled even herself. The guard fumbled with his phone, stammering as he relayed the emergency. Within minutes, sirens wailed outside. Paramedics stormed the lobby, equipment clattering. Evelyn backed away, chest heaving, her hands trembling but steady enough to keep her from collapsing. They took over, working with swift precision. Oxygen, mask, IV, defibrillator pads at the ready. Evelyn stood against the wall, her uniform damp with sweat, praying. One of the paramedics glanced at her. "What happened?" "He collapsed," she said, voice raw. "I think it's his heart. I saw the signs all week. No one else noticed." The paramedic's eyes softened with understanding. "You may have just saved him." Richard's eyes fluttered open briefly, as they lifted him onto the stretcher. He looked disoriented, his pride stripped away, but his gaze found Evelyn. For a split second, she saw something entirely new in his expression. Not arrogance, not distance, gratitude, vulnerability. "Don't leave," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Evelyn reached for his hand, squeezing it firmly. "I'm not going anywhere." The doors slammed. The ambulance roared into the night. Evelyn stood on the steps of Serrano Global, watching the flashing lights disappear into the city, her knees trembling. She realized she was shaking, her palms raw from compressions. But inside her chest, a fierce strength burned. She had done it. She had not stayed silent this time. The hospital. Hours later, Evelyn sat in the cold waiting room of St. Michael's Hospital. She had insisted on following the ambulance. Her cleaning uniform was rumpled, her hair escaping its bun, but she didn't care. Doctors passed through, swinging doors, their faces unreadable. Evelyn clutched her hands together, whispering prayers. Finally, a physician approached. "Are you family?" Evelyn hesitated. She was no one in this man's world, just a cleaning lady, yet she lifted her chin. "I'm the one who found him. Please, is he alive?" The doctor nodded. "He's stable. Early signs of a major heart attack. Another hour and it might have been fatal. Whoever called it in saved his life." Evelyn closed her eyes, tears slipping free. Relief washed through her like sunlight after a storm. Evelyn and Richard. The next morning, Evelyn stood quietly by the hospital bed. Richard Serrano looked smaller without his armor. No tailored suit, no commanding posture. Just a man, pale against white sheets, wires running from his chest to monitors that beeped softly. He stirred, his eyes opening. When he saw her, a faint smile tugged at his lips. "You again." Evelyn chuckled weakly. "Yes, sir. Me again." His voice was hoarse but sincere. "You saved my life." "You wouldn't listen to me," Evelyn replied softly, pulling a chair closer. "But I wasn't about to let you leave this world, not when I knew the signs." He studied her, really studied her, as though seeing her for the first time. The cleaner he had walked past countless times now stood as the person who had given him a second chance. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why did you care?" Evelyn's eyes glistened. "Because I've already buried someone I loved who thought he was too strong to fall. I couldn't stand by and watch it happen again. Not even to you." Richard's throat tightened, his eyes wet with unspoken emotion. He turned his gaze toward the window, sunlight spilling through. For once, he let his walls down, buckled. The sound of his briefcase crashing against the marble echoed like a gunshot. Evelyn gasped, rushing forward as Richard Serrano collapsed at her feet. The world moved quickly in the days following Richard Serrano's collapse. News outlets buzzed with speculation once word leaked that the billionaire CEO had been rushed to the hospital. Investors panicked, employees whispered, and board members scrambled. But while the world outside spun in chaos, inside a quiet hospital room, a very different transformation was taking place. The man behind the armor, Richard Serrano, remained in the hospital for a week under strict observation. For the first time in decades, he was forced to sit still. No meetings, no endless phone calls, no battles with competitors, just rest, reflection, and the steady reminder of how close he had come to death. And Evelyn Carter. She visited every day, slipping in quietly during her off hours. At first, Richard couldn't understand why. She owed him nothing. But gradually, he began to accept her presence, even anticipate it. One morning, as the sunlight filtered through pale blue curtains, Richard turned to her. "Do you ever get tired of being invisible?" Evelyn blinked, surprised by the question. "Invisible?" He gestured weakly. "People like me, we walk past people like you every day. We don't even see you. I can't remember how many times I walked past you in that lobby without so much as a nod." Her lips curved in a small smile. "That's the thing about being invisible. You learn to see what others don't." Richard was quiet, his gaze fixed on the IV line in his arm. "If you hadn't seen me, I'd be dead." Evelyn placed a hand over his. "Sometimes it takes falling for people to finally look up. Company shockwaves." Meanwhile, back at Serrano Global, the story spread. Employees whispered in the break rooms about how it wasn't an executive or a board member who had saved the company's leader, but a cleaning lady. The janitorial staff, once overlooked shadows in the halls, walked with a little more pride. Executives who once passed Evelyn without a glance now nodded respectfully. Some even thanked her. But Evelyn brushed it off. She hadn't done it for recognition. She had done it because it was the right thing to do. Still, Richard Serrano couldn't forget it. The return. When Richard returned to the office weeks later, thinner but stronger, the building seemed to hold its breath. His empire had nearly lost him, and now they waited to see if he had changed. He strode into the lobby, but this time his eyes didn't skim past Evelyn. He stopped in front of her mop bucket, his suit freshly pressed, his smile faint but genuine. "Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice carrying through the lobby. "Thank you." The employees nearby paused, startled. Evelyn blushed, nodding. "Just doing what needed to be done, sir." "No," Richard replied firmly. "You did what no one else dared. You saved my life, and I won't forget that." He walked on, but the moment lingered like a ripple through the building. For the first time, Serrano Global's employees saw their CEO acknowledge someone outside the upper floors. Transformation. Over the following months, subtle changes unfolded. Richard mandated new health and wellness programs, not just for executives but for every employee, from janitors to managers. He insisted on quarterly health screenings, gym subsidies, and mandatory breaks. When asked why, he answered simply, "Because a woman who most of you never noticed saw what I refused to. And she saved me." If one life matters, every life matters. Evelyn found herself invited to events she never imagined attending, not as a guest of honor, but as a respected voice. Richard even requested her input during a company-wide initiative to recognize the invisible workers, those who cleaned, repaired, and maintained the empire behind the scenes. It wasn't about publicity. It was about a man learning, painfully, that he was human, and that humanity connected them all. Evelyn's quiet victory. At home, Evelyn's daughter Janelle teased her. "Mama, you're practically famous now. The cleaning lady who saved the billionaire." Evelyn laughed, shaking her head. "I don't want fame. I just want people to remember that life is fragile and worth noticing." But inside, she carried a quiet pride. For years, she had been invisible, her work unseen. Now, not only had she saved a life, but she had changed the way others saw her and themselves. Her husband Harold's memory no longer carried the same weight of regret. She had done for another man what she couldn't do for him. In a way, she felt Harold's spirit smiling down on her, proud that she had found the courage. Richard's reflection. One evening, long after he had returned to work, Richard called Evelyn into his office. She stood awkwardly in the vast room, polished wood and leather gleaming around her. "I wanted to tell you something," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it. "Before all this, I thought strength meant pushing through pain, ignoring weakness. But you taught me that strength is listening, even to those voices we ignore." Evelyn's eyes softened. "Sometimes it takes being seen by the right person at the right time." Richard smiled faintly. "And sometimes it takes someone invisible to remind us we're human." He offered her his hand, not as CEO to employee, but as man to woman, equal to equal. Evelyn shook it firmly, eyes glistening. A legacy. Months later, Serrano Global announced a new foundation focused on employee health and well-being. Richard named it the Carter Initiative, after Evelyn. She protested, embarrassed, but he insisted. "Because without you," he said during the announcement, "there would be no me." And if I can build empires, surely I can build one that remembers every hand that holds it up." The applause thundered, but Evelyn stood quietly at the back, her heart swelling. She didn't need the spotlight. She had already won the victory that mattered, proving that even the most invisible person could make the most visible difference.